Yarosh Patil from Brazil. So my presentation is about encouraging affirmative action in the private sector. So let's see how to go about that. First question: in India, who needs affirmative action? The answer is super clear. It's Dalits, tribals, and Muslims. These are the three communities which are at the bottom of every socio-economic indicator, and they are about 40%, which is almost half the Indian population. It's about 500 million people. It's 100 million more people than the entire US. They're disproportionately poor as well. So, okay, fine. Let's going past. What is to be done, as Vladimir Lenin said in 1901? So, first thing is like, let's see what's already been done. The government's tried out a bunch of things. You had scholarships, subsidies, various kind of land transfer schemes, all sorts of things have been tried out. But clearly they haven't been very effective, or like, they haven't been like very effective. So one of these measures of affirmative action, or whatever, is called reservations, also known in other countries as the quota system, and that's very controversial. There's a lot of frenzied, polarized debate over it. So under the system, you reserve a certain number of central jobs and educational seats for Dalits and tribals, but not Muslims. Very. So anyway, so that's been happening since India became an independent country. And well, again, it hasn't been that effective because these communities are still at the bottom. And now what's happened is that since in India, disparity is very clearly along caste and religious lines, every caste and religion is now trying to sort of mobilize and get the benefits of reservation. So there's really a mad scramble to get on board, and it can often get really violent. Haryana state in India saw large-scale rioting, arsoning. There was destruction of a lot of public property, a lot of money lost. So it's really getting out of hand. And one of the things is that in the public sector, the number of jobs and educational seats which you can get is really limited. So now a lot of these, there's a growing demand to extend this to the private sector, extend the system of reservations to the private sector. Now this has been seen with alarm by Indian industry. Confederation of Indian Industry, which is one of the leading representatives of Indian business, they issued a statement saying, we support affirmative action, but if quotas are imposed on us, we will oppose it with quote-unquote all the forces at our command. So they are pretty clear that they don't want quotas in the private sector. So that's a political stalemate right now. Politicians have to answer to their constituencies, and it's a very strong demand from the public, and the private sector is dead opposed. So how, and this is something which me and my, which we are facing in a real sense at the national level, but in the state of Telangana, where my MP comes from. So this is really the motivation for doing this research, as to what can be the way out. So I looked at some other countries: Malaysia, South Africa, Canada, and the US. Why these countries? There was a 2006 study done by the government of India called the Sacha Committee, which looked at the socio-economic status of Muslims, and one of the subsequent follow-up studies to that looked at these countries to see the diversity measures. So that's why I've chosen these 4 countries. Now, before I go any further, to see as to how they have dealt with this issue. Now, before I go any further, first thing I must say is that debates on affirmative action are largely theoretical, in the sense that there's barely any information on what has been the impact of implementing these plans. So more research in that direction as to actually verifying the efficacy of affirmative action programs will be really useful. Now, going forward, how did Malaysia deal with it? So Malaysia, the context was that the Malays are the majority. They're about 75% of the population. They're poor, and the Chinese and the Indians, who cumulatively were about 25%, they were rich. So this disparity finally resulted in race riots in 1969. And the Malays were like, you know what, we're in the majority, we've got democracy, let's use political power to redistribute resources. And they did that in a massive way. They had a national new economic policy of 1970, where they said 30% of total share capital of all companies should belong to Malays. And they did this in a bunch of ways. They had quotas in company ownership, which were enforced upon private companies, quotas in education, public procurement gave preference to Malays in various ways by giving them concessions. Many foreign companies were taken over by the government and given to Malay hands. You had various fiscal incentives, you had taxes to Malay companies, like various kinds of subsidies and breaks. So what is the result? This began in 1970. By 2002, Malay share capital ownership increased from 2.4% to 19%, which is pretty good. And there are other indicators as well, which I've put in my paper. Okay, Canada. Now here we see that Canada, South Africa, and the US, which are the remaining countries in my study, they have used largely similar strategies. So Canada had a targeted system. It was targeted at women, people with disabilities, indigenous people, and visible minorities. The goal was to remove entry barriers. What do I mean by that? I'll get to that in a minute. But initially it was voluntary, which nobody took seriously. So finally they realized that making it voluntary is just not enough. It needs to have a legislative basis. There should be a law which mandates it. And this is a key finding because every country which has experimented with affirmative action has finally had to enact a law. So which law? It is called the Employment Equity Act, and under this, every employer in the private sector as well as the public sector, but it was specifically targeted at private sector, has to talk to their employees, especially people who are from the deprived groups, women, PWs in this case, and come up with a plan as to how to remove the entry barriers which these groups are facing. They have to maintain records of what the plan is, how has the implementation been, and submit that to the Canadian government. Enforcement of the plan was and then the second strategy was public procurement. So they gave every person who was bidding for a government contract had to have implemented affirmative action properly, the employment equity plans properly, and monitoring was given to the Canadian Human Rights Commission. South Africa used more or less the same strategy as Canada, except that instead of a targeted approach, it was not targeted. So they just said that you can't discriminate against anybody on a whole bunch of things, race, religion, including HIV status. And it was a little more comprehensive in the sense that they said that your employment equity plans should also include things like recruitment, wages, promotion, like comprehensive list. So all of these things you should keep in mind when you're making a plan. They set up a separate commission for enforcing the act. What's been the impact? In 1998 when the act was passed, whites were 11% of the population. They occupied 89% of managerial positions in private companies. And after about 20 years, their domination came down by 20% to 68.9%, which is pretty good. But unfortunately, the blacks didn't really benefit that much. Their representation just increased by 3%, from 11% to 14%. But at least it made some dent. The USA also had a similar approach. They enacted the Civil Rights Act, which prohibited discrimination. Many subsequent acts, age, disability, genetics, military service, and through executive orders, because it's a presidential system, they set up public procurement where every person who's bidding for government contracts had to implement equal opportunity in their workforce, and they set up an equal opportunity commission to enforce the act and an office of federal contract compliance to monitor this in the public sector. Okay, now again, data on US and Canada as to how effective it was is hard to come by, so future studies would be awesome in that direction. Okay, now let's summarize the strategies. So what were the strategies used by these countries? First thing was a law which prohibits discrimination and makes it necessary for employers to have equal opportunity planning, where you talk to the people who are being excluded and you make plans as to how they can be included. Second is you set up institutions to monitor them. Third is public procurement. Large-scale redistribution like Malaysia did would be amazing, but unfortunately it's a small country with a homogeneous population, so it can't be done in India. Okay. Now, using these strategies, what can we use for an Indian solution? So, first thing is we need a law. So we can call it the Equal Opportunity. So this is half of my paper is actually a bill which I've drafted. If anybody here is a lawyer and can go through it, I'd be really happy. We can call it the Equal Opportunity Act, Affirmative Action Act. You can call it whatever. I chose equal opportunity. Should it be targeted or not targeted? It should be targeted. Why? Because it's absolutely clear who needs assistance. It's not like you have a billion people and you're not sure who needs assistance, so let's define it in negative terms. It's absolutely clear, 40% of the population is Dalits, tribal and Muslims, they need help. Equal opportunity planning should be made compulsory. Why? Because we are really trying to bring about a cultural shift and a shift in norms. And that would be done if you train people in the planning process where the people who are being excluded are included in that planning process. So they should come up with these annual plans. To take steps, and these plans should tell you what steps you can take to facilitate inclusion. To remove, another way of saying it, removing entry barriers. Some examples could be you do placements in colleges where you know there are a lot of Dalits, tribals, or Muslims. You state in your job placements that the Dalit, tribals, and Muslims are encouraged to apply. You can put jobs in Urdu newspapers because circulation is almost entirely amongst Muslims. Another thing is that people tend to be stuck in certain job categories, like Dalits tend to do menial work in companies. So you can also provide skill training to break that siloization, so to encourage upward mobility. Second thing is enforcement. In India, we've got too many institutions. It's a legacy of our caste system, where we set up a new institution for everything. So you strengthen the human rights commissions by setting up equal opportunity committees as a subsidiary body under them. They would, so if anybody feels discriminated, they can approach them for justice. Second thing is that employers wouldn't be mandated to submit reports to the government because our country is too big, it would be a regulatory burden. But if anybody complains, the committee should be empowered to get those reports from them and study the issue. So for that, it should these should have the status of RTI documents, and the committee should have the power of a civil court because it can have investigation powers. Then secondly, the Indian judiciary is overburdened. So let's try to avoid formal litigation. So the Equal Opportunity Committee should be empowered to resolve disputes through mediation and conciliation. Because the objective is course correction, not really penalizing people. If it fails, then it can be escalated to the Human Rights Commission, which anyway have the powers of civil courts, and they can resolve it through adjudication. They can also provide assistance to similar cases in the formal legal system. Then other roles of the committee would be training and capacity building. So let's say you have a company, but there are no Dalits, tribal and Muslims in your company, so you don't know how to actually include them. So they can provide you consultancy services and provide you as to how to go about this planning process. They can also do research and advocacy. So they publish policy briefs and policy papers, so the government knows what kind of changes to make. Business administration education reform is crucial in human resources, in MBA. People who are going to run the private sector, they should know how to have policies which are inclusive. If somebody comes to you with a complaint of discrimination, how to deal with that. So this should be part of education curriculum. So the UGC can issue guidelines to make this mandatory in public universities, and private universities can be incentivized to pick it up. Public procurement, another key strategy. The government should definitely provide concessions to companies which are owned by Dalit, tribal, or Muslims, or have a lot of them in the company, or those which have implemented equal opportunity like in a good way. So, an issue is that it's possible for a small elite of Dalit, tribal, or Muslims to form a cartel and prevent other companies from coming up and create like an oligopolistic or monopolistic situation. So there should be a penalty clause for that as well to prevent cartelization. And then you can provide various fiscal incentives. You can have stamp duty, reduction in stamp duty, land conversion charges, GST, send back, and so on. So if these steps are taken, then hopefully it'll result to some. It'll provide a legislative basis to taking large-scale action to address the deprivation of these three communities. And the biggest thing will be that hopefully there'll be a change in mindset, so that people know that at least they should try to be inclusive in running their businesses. So yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much.